Hello YouTubers. Today we're going to show you how to do a handset to do a foundation wall. Currently I'm working on a garage for myself, and rather than pay somebody to do it, I'm going to do it myself. I'm using what's called a handset system or cam lock system. Supplies you need for this type of job: you need OSB 3/4 inch plywood, you need 2x4s, you need turnbuckles, which are right there, you need cam locks, you need grasshoppers, or also known as strong back clamps. You need the wall ties, and you need the wall ties to be the same thickness of your wall. And when I say the thickness of your wall, as you can see down in there, the blue cones are the thickness of what your wall should be. You're also going to need 6-penny finish nails, 16-penny duplex nails, and 8-penny duplex nails. You also need some concrete stakes for your bracing, right there. As far as your turnbuckles, your grasshoppers, and your cam locks, and your wall ties, you can get those supplies from your local industrial concrete supplier. Usually bigger companies, they'll rent the cam locks, the grasshoppers, and the turnbuckles to you, and then you can just buy the wall ties from them. Once you've gathered all your supplies together, the first step is to lay out your wall line, and you're going to lay it out on top of the footing. You want to start with the outside of the wall, of where your wall's going to be. You're going to lay it out, chalk a line, and that is going to be your starting point for laying down your bottom plate. When you start to lay down your bottom plate, you want to ensure that it's 3/4 of an inch from your wall line to account for the OSB plywood. I'll use a guide so I don't have to pull my tape measure out every 5 minutes. I'll use a piece of OSB plywood. I'll set it on the line, and then I'll put my 2x4 behind the OSB so that I know that the 2x4 is where it needs to be. That's kind of what your bottom plate looks like. To secure your bottom plate to the footing, I use a 1/4 inch concrete bit with a hammer drill. I'll drill a hole through the wood into the concrete, and then I'll use a 16-penny nail and an 8-penny nail, use them together, hammer them in the same hole, and that'll secure your bottom plate to the footing. When you're doing your bottom plate, you want to do both sides. So when you get the outside of your wall done with the bottom plate, then you're going to start laying down the bottom plate for the inside of the wall. And what I'll do there is I'll cut it, because my wall is 8 inches, I'll cut a 9.5 inch block put it between the outside plate and then secure the inside plate, butt it up against the 9.5-inch block that I cut, and start securing it to the footing. Once you have your plate laid down on the inside and the outside, then it's time to start prepping your plywood. To prep your plywood, you want your wall ties to be 16 inches on center. So, for example, to make sure all your plywood's 16 inches on center, you're going to come 8 inches from each side for your outside holes. So I'll come 8 inches down, 8 inches from the top, drill a hole. The hole size has to be 13/16 for your wall tie to fit through. Then you go through and you'll go 16 inches on center with your holes. So here's your wall tie, 13/16. It'll fit in the hole, and then when you set your plywood, you put the cam lock on the other side. But as far as drilling purposes goes, come 8 inches down, and then you'll go 24 inches unless you want to measure every 16, but you can just count 16 inches. So you go 8 inches, 24 inches, and then 40 inches. And then in your 8-foot lengthwise, you're going to go 8 inches, 24 inches, 40 inches, 56 inches, 72 inches, and 88 inches. And that will give you 16-inch on centers for your wall ties. Your wall ties is what helps secure your forms so they maintain strength and don't blow out. When I'm prepping my plywood for my wall ties, I'll drill through 3 pieces at a time just to save some time. Line up your sheets of plywood. You can nail them together so they stay aligned while you're drilling through. Get all your plywood prepped, and then once your plywood is prepped, it's time to start laying down some plywood. Now I always start on the outside. So with your first piece, you want to make sure that it's level. Ensuring that your plywood is level, both top and vertically, will ensure that your wall will stay level once you start laying down the other sheets. If you're starting on a corner like I did, your first sheet has to be sure it's level, and then your second sheet also has to be level. I'll secure those by using a 6-penny nail into the bottom plate. I'll get my plywood to where it's level, secure it to the bottom plate with a 6-penny nail. Then I bring my second piece, make sure it's level, and then secure it to the bottom plate with a 6-penny nail. It's vitally important that your plywood is level, especially on your first sheets, to ensure when you get all the way down to the next corner, that corner is also level. Otherwise, you're going to have some crooked cuts on your plywood to make sure it's level. If you get your first corner level, or your first sheet, all you really have to do is make sure that your joint is tight against the previous plywood you set, and then the rest should be level. Now if you're going higher than 4 feet, you can lay your plywood up on end to where it's 8 foot tall. If you're going higher than 8 foot, it's important that your sheets are lined up. You don't want this, I've got a little bit, my sheets aren't lined up, but I'm not going higher than 4 feet, so it wasn't vitally important that my sheets line up. If you are going higher than 8 feet, you want to ensure that you start on the high corner side. Otherwise your plywood could get off, and depending on how level your footing is, your plywood might not be against the bottom plate anymore. So if you're going higher than 8 feet, you should start in the high corner. Well, you should always start in the high corner, but if your footing's pretty level, it's not too big of a concern. So once I get one line of wall done, that's when I'm going to start putting my cam locks on. Your cam locks lock your tie into the plywood. So as you can see, my tie is right there, and my cam lock has secured the tie to the plywood, and it just secures it like that. Get your first line done, put your cam locks on with your ties. When you're doing the ties and the cam locks, you will need somebody else to help you, somebody to put the tie through the hole, and another guy to secure the tie with the cam lock. After you get all your cam locks and your ties on, then you're going to use your 2x4s. You're going to beat them in between the cam lock and the plywood. Beat them in with a hammer. They're going to fit tight, but don't be scared. Just beat that 2x4 down in between the plywood and the cam lock, and it'll help secure the wall, help stiffen it up. Once you get your first line done with 2x4s and cam locks, then you can use bracing or a turnbuckle so the wall doesn't flap in the wind or fall over or anything like that, and it stays secure. You don't need to set all your turnbuckles when you're first laying out. Just one turnbuckle will secure it so you can start working on your next line. Then you start your next line, making sure your corner is level. So you're going to come to your next corner, make sure it's level, tack it to your bottom plate, get your line done, and then repeat the process of putting your ties and cam locks and your whalers on, your 2x4 whalers. Once you have completed the entire outside of your wall, you're going to go through, you're going to make sure all your whalers are on, and then you're going to set turnbuckle bracing, and you set them about every 4 feet. I go every 4th cam lock. It's a little more than 4 feet, but it's plenty sufficient to ensure the wall is secure. Set all your turnbuckles, stake them into the ground with your concrete stakes. I put a 16-penny duplex nail through the hole of my concrete stake and beat it down to ensure my 2x4 doesn't pop up or anything like that. Once I get all my turnbuckles in place, then I line the wall. Now, if you've done this correctly and your corner is level, you don't need a turnbuckle on the corners. The corners should be level. So now I'm going to run my string line right here. I'm going to run it from this corner all the way down to that corner. And at each turnbuckle right here, I'm going to use a plywood spacer and make sure it fits right behind the string, because as you can see, I'm using that piece of plywood right there as my guide to ensure my wall is straight. put your plywood behind the string. Make sure it fits behind the string. If your plywood is over the top of the string, obviously you're going to have to spin this turnbuckle, spin it in, or actually spin it out so the wall moves out to where the plywood fits right behind the string. You're going to do this at every turnbuckle, and you're going to want a turnbuckle every 4 feet, like I said, just to make sure that your wall is straight. You go through and you straighten the entire outside of your wall. Now, when I did this project, I did the inside first, but looking back on it, I should have done the outside first because I had some issues with my corner ties. They weren't aligning on 16-inch centers, so I had to re-drill a piece of plywood to make sure my ties lined up from the inside. So when you're doing your corners, when you go to do the opposite side of the wall, you want to make sure that your ties line up so you don't have to re-drill your holes like I did. Your turnbuckles are nailed to the strong back. I used 3 16-penny nails to nail my turnbuckle into the 2x4. And then you're going to use your grasshoppers here. Your grasshoppers, they just come off like that, and to put them on, you clip them to the cam lock right there. And they're a little tight sometimes. Oh. It's a little difficult to do this with one hand while I'm holding a phone. But that's your grasshopper. Sometimes when you rent this stuff, it's not high quality material. But that's how you secure your strongback 2x4 to your cam lock. I'm going to go through and I'm going to put a 16-penny nail in all of these holes just to ensure that they don't pop up, because when you vibrate the wall, sometimes these grasshoppers, they'll pop off, and you don't want that to happen right in the middle of a pour. As far as your 2x4 joints are concerned, as you can see here, I've got it double plated. I've got a joint here. You want to try to keep your 2x4 joints in the center of your cam lock. And then you're going to nail another 2x4 on top of that 2x4 with 16-penny nails, just to provide that extra strength. You don't want your 2x4 joints lined up with your plywood joints, because that will create a weak point, and you want to avoid weak points as much as possible. Joints should not align when you're using the whalers, 2x4 whalers in your plywood. This project, any carpenter or anybody with basic carpentry skills, it's a pretty easy project. You just got to think about what you're doing, make sure your cuts are correct, make sure your cuts are correct, and make sure you're lining up your pieces correctly. Make sure your ties are 16 inches on center. Because my wall's only 3 foot tall, I've only used 2 2x4 whalers. So I've got the 8-inch. I've got the 8-inch height, and then it's the 24-inch height. I didn't go up to 40 because that's going to be higher than the top of the concrete. So I'm not too concerned that I don't have a third one. It is important that you do secure your corners, however. Your corners is where you're going to have most likely have your blowout. So on my corners, I did 3 rows of 2x4 whalers, plus I got some kickers right there to secure the corner. On the outside corner, you're nailing your outside corners, you want your 2x4s to overlap like so. So there's the wall. My 2x4 whalers are overlapping each other. And then I put 2 duplex nails, 16 penny nails, into the 2x4 of the other whaler. And then I nail these boards butt up against the other 2x4s, and they serve as a bracing for the corner so you don't have to kick them. And I've got those nailed into the whalers, as you can see right there. So for anybody that's looking to do their own foundation wall, that's kind of my 2 cents on it. Definitely saved me some money to do it myself. It was only like $400 to rent the hardware, like the turnbuckles and the cam locks. The OSB plywood was ridiculous, but I'm hoping that I'll be able to reuse it for sheeting in my garage, so I won't be out too much. If you have any questions or comments, just make a comment in the comment section. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks.